before everybody joins us, I'm going to just tell you why I have the Wizard of Oz poster behind me. And that is, in this talk, you're going to discover something that's the same thing Dorothy discovered when she was searching so hard to find the mighty wizard and trying to get the wizard to save her. And it turned out the wizard is some guy behind a curtain, and that the power was in her all along. All she had to do was click her heels together. And in this presentation that you're about to hear, you're going to discover that we've been begging and pleading our government leaders. How can we lobby Congress? How can we lobby the president? How can we get the UN to save us? How can we get the mighty, powerful world leaders to save us? And wait a minute, folks. The power is in us. All we have to do is click our heels together and click our thinking to world citizenship, and we have the power. And this is an incredibly liberating story, and you're going to have fun listening to it, and you're going to find out why as it's played on PBS stations across the country and on Link TV to Dish and Satellite Network, so many people are loving this film because it shows them that we are the ones with the power to change our world. So we'll get into that in a few moments, folks. Once we start the official meeting.
And it's incredible how people just don't know about Garry Davis. I mean, he was so famous in his day in the late 40s, early 50s, and that people just don't know about him now. I had never heard of him before a few months ago when I saw the film and his inspiring story. And it's just, I mean, it's amazing to me that he's not more well known. So, okay, why don't we get started? I'd like to welcome everybody to The World is My Country screening and discussion. I'm Steve Engel. I'm a member of Massachusetts Peace Action. Unfortunately, we don't have time tonight to watch the whole film, but if you registered for the film for this event, you received a link to watch the film for free, and that link is good until the end of June 30th. And if you're watching this after that time, you can go to theworldismycountry.com for information on how to watch The World is My Country. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Massachusetts Peace Action and Brian Garvey, the assistant director, who helped a lot putting this event together. Also, our other co-sponsor, the Young World Federalists, and also the JFK Peace Project group in Massachusetts Peace Action, and Marty Schatz, who kind of inspired me and a lot of us by reminding us of the continued relevance of JFK's American University speech from June 1963, where he talked about world peace. Really, the last president in my recollection that really talked about world peace as a vision. Our speaker tonight, Arthur Kanigis, is president of Future Wave, Inc., a nonprofit organization dedicated to shifting our culture of violence to a culture of peace. In 1978, Arthur produced War Without Winners, a TV documentary on the nuclear war issue, narrated by Paul Newman. And in 1983, Arthur was involved in the production of the ABC TV special, The Day After, which you may have seen. It's very, very well-known TV film that had over 100 million views in this country and 200 million views in the Soviet Union. And Reagan, in his memoirs, credits this film, The Day After, with really changing his attitude towards the idea that a nuclear war could be won. And it led to the arms agreements with Gorbachev. And so it's something that shows how powerful that medium of film can be. And also, I'd like to welcome Melanie Bennett, who was the producer, who is going to kind of be behind the scenes tonight, but she is going to be orchestrating the film clips. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the stage over to Arthur, and The World is My Country. Arthur.
Thank you. Well, first thing I want to do is just to tell you how much I love Mass Peace Action, because I followed you and you're doing some of the most important cutting edge work on the planet. So thank you for having me as a part of your forum. And I especially thank Melanie and our team who've made this film possible. I want to go back a bit to the when I was 15 years old and I was in high school, and the Cuban Missile Crisis came along. And I remember in Washington, D.C., everybody was mobilizing for this war. And my sister's boyfriends came over who were being called up for the reserves and being called up to mobilize for this war. And there was an incredible fear hanging over all of us. And when I went to school, the teachers told us that we were supposed to get down under our desks, put our heads between our legs, and as the class clown put it, kiss our butts goodbye. And I said, no way. I said, I'm not going to do that. Have you seen the pictures of Hiroshima? You know, this school is not going to be here. And I was sent down to the principal's office. Well, again, I'd been sent for bringing peace pilgrim to speak at classes unauthorized and doing other troublemaking. And then I wanted to go in directly into what the president at that time said. Well, we're being told we're supposed to hide under our desks. Here's what President Kennedy said to the United Nations, September 25th, 1961.
Today, every inhabitant of this planet must contemplate the day when this planet may no longer be habitable. Every man, woman, and child lives under a nuclear sword of Damocles, hanging by the slenderest of threads, capable of being cut at any moment by accident or miscalculation or by madness. The weapons of war must be abolished before they abolish us.
Wow, wow. This whole planet may no longer be inhabitable. What's this about fighting and winning a nuclear war or hiding under your desk? There's not going to be a habitable planet. And the president realized that. And Eisenhower, many of you have heard his powerful talk about the military-industrial complex. And this farewell warning of a general and a president warned that runaway power of the military-industrial complex was going to drain our society, was going to prevent us from having the miraculous benefits of a abundant society that we were supposed to get out of this new advanced technological era. And all those things have come true. Now, why is it? Why is it that, oh, well, first of all, let's be thankful for the miracle. I mean, for some reason, we've managed to survive under that sword for, you know, for more than half a century. That's incredible. We have to be very thankful for that. And yet, as the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists clock says, humanity stands a proverbial 100 seconds away from total annihilation, not only from nuclear war, but by planetary, by ecological crisis and so on. I mean, folks, our planet is in trouble. Now, what's the key to the solution? I think that the key to the solution is, I struggled to find that. And I was amazed to find a very interesting character, Garry Davis, who was a song and dance man on Broadway, a song and dance man on Broadway that Albert Einstein said had discovered the key to whether humanity will, quote, die by its own hand or continue to exist. Albert Einstein, many people consider the smartest man alive, said that this is the guy with the key. Let's take a quick look at one of the actions that this song and dance man pulled off you know, he had the guts, because he was an actor, to be able to do crazy things like as you'll see in a moment. Let me show you what he did. Play the clip.
At a recent sitting of the United Nations General Assembly, there was an astonishing outburst from Mr. Garry Davis, known as World Citizen #1.
I pass the word to the people.
So what I did was I got up before anybody could stop me. There were balcony railings there. I leaped over the balcony railings out to the front where everybody could see me, and I shouted,
I interrupt to make a
I interrupt in the name of the people not represented here.
À l'Assemblée générale de l'ONU, Garry Davis, le citoyen du monde.
Well, I started. The nations you represent divide us and lead us to the abyss of total war. What we need is one world. And if you won't do it, step aside And a People's World Assembly will arise from our own ranks to do it, because we can be served by nothing less.
He was an actor, a song and dance man who leapt off the Broadway stage onto the world stage in 1948, taking on cops, border guards, armies, and whole nations, showing us that we don't have to be awed by their props of power and control. We don't have to accept a world ravaged by war and plunging towards environmental disaster. For 65 years, as a citizen of no nation, only the world, Garry Davis made his own props of freedom, demonstrating that we, the people, can tear down the walls of oppression and write our own story. We can build a world that is constructive for all and destructive to none. A world in which all of us can truly say, the world is my country.
The world is my country. You know, Garry Davis and I share something in common, and that is that after that Cuban Missile Crisis, where I was so frightened about the destruction of our world, I joined the Young World Federalists, and they're the co-sponsors of this event. And Garry Davis joined the World Federalists as well, and he worked so hard for World Federation until he went there to the UN and called on the UN to reform itself, to allow a government of, by, and for the people of the world. And Eleanor Roosevelt answered back in her My Day column, going out to millions of people across the country. She said that the United Nations wasn't set up to create a government. It was a place for nations to let off steam instead of throwing bombs and missiles. They could throw words at each other. And then she said, you know, how much better it would be if Mr. Davis, well, let me show you the next clip, and then I'll tell you what she said after that. Here's what Garry Davis, after he interrupted that United Nations session, there was a huge outpouring of support from him from all over Europe, and all the top French intellectuals, from Jean-Paul Sartre, Camus, Einstein, all came to rally to his defense. And here's what happened at the Velodrome.
It struck me like lightning that humans already have a system for eliminating war. It's too simple. Come on, Garry, you're kidding. No, inside countries with one government, we don't fight wars. How about civil wars? Two governments, two sovereignties. But if everyone accepts one government, no war. I look around New York and I see, you know, ethnic groups all over the place, the same ones that were at war with each other in other countries. Here they're playing chess in Washington Square. Is it human nature to go to war? Why aren't they at war? Is it suddenly they all love each other? No way. Some even commit crimes against each other. But then somebody calls the cops, and they're hauled before a judge, and there's a trial. Conflicts can be resolved, not by blowing up neighborhoods, but in a court of law. Then I read Tom Paine's The Rights of Man. Tom Paine made that famous statement, "My country is the world." So if the world is our country, this is too simple, really. If the world is our country and we claim it, and we raise our allegiance to that level, to the top level, no more fictional borders. That's the key. And therefore, no more wars.
Now, that was the clip about when Garry joined the World Federalists, when he realized that that the key to stopping war was actually to create government above the nations that divide us, and that's what the World Federalists are all about. And because of that, this is when, as I mentioned, he pulled off this grand act of basically political theater there at the UN. That's what he called it when he interrupted, and when Jean-Paul Sartre and Camus and others all joined him in that incredible action. And that sparked such a furor in Europe that here's what happened a few days later.
We had to plan a big, spectacular
this, by the way, wait,
show.
hold on a second with the show, Melanie. Let me show what he's doing. Okay, so what happened was, there in Paris at that very same time, Eleanor Roosevelt had proposed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the United Nations was meeting in Paris. This was before the building was built on the East River. So the UN General Assembly was about to happen at the Palais des Chaillot. There was about to be a vote on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was the beginning of creating world law for our planet, of creating a common standard that human rights had to be observed all around the world for all peoples and all nations. This is the beginning of world law. And this resolution, this was about to come to the United Nations General Assembly after years of work by Eleanor Roosevelt and others, but the Soviets were adamantly blocking it. They said, this is an intrusion on our internal affairs. You can't tell us what we can do inside. And so then here's what happened on that eve of that historic vote. This is in 1948, and this is taking place on December 9th, 1948.
We had to plan a big, big, spectacular show to break the logjam. When that vote came up in the General Assembly, we rented the biggest hall in Paris. It's called the Vélodrome d'Hiver. Vélodrome d'Hiver is the Madison Square Garden of Paris. And we rented it on the 3rd of December to hold the meeting on the 9th of December, an impossible task to fill that hall in 5 days. And they put me in a little room, and I was doing my speech, trying to learn it, and the other speakers all went up to the platform. Now, when I went on, I was brought up to this huge amphitheater, and I was absolutely stunned by the number of people there. It was 20,000 people. Life magazine did a big spread on this. Then a chant started, slowly building. Garry Davies, Garry. I mean, I'm used to applause, but this was a shockwave of sound. And you know, my eyes get wide, and you know, my hands rise in the air, my fists clenched. I was taken in. You know, I was taken in by this incredible thrust of power. You know, I began to lose myself. This kind of mass reaction. But mass power is like a drug. For a brief moment, I really gave in to the crowds of adoration. Then, you know, you draw back, fearful of what the very thing we're rebelling against, giving power to one person, is happening. So, you know, I was, you know, terrified. And then speaker after speaker, and everybody was restive. Everybody wanted to hear what the president of the United Nations said about making peace. Well, finally it came. And here's one of the things he said. He said, as for me, I would be in full agreement with the ultimate goal of world federation and of world citizenship. Dr. Evatt, nice guy, brilliant guy. The hall erupts in cheers. Then the letter continues. The United Nations organization has not received the general power or the prerogative to make peace. Indeed, the charter itself stipulated that the great powers would make peace, and in the primary function of the United Nations would be to maintain international peace once this has been made. To the public, this was sheer gobbledygook. Who the hell can make peace then if the United Nations can't make peace and admits it? Who is to make peace? The nations can't make peace, they make war. Well, finally the crowd reacts in a fury. Well, a young guy, his eyes really wild, you know, hair streaming, he pushes through our security, jumps onto the speaker's platform, and he appeals to me. We are tired of mere words. You're a man of action. Lead us. We will follow you. Tell us what to do. Young people, and everybody, hey, applause. Hey, I didn't know how to answer that. You know, he was doing what I did at the United Nations. But anyway, I pulled my thoughts together and I began to read my speech. And it was totally inadequate. Totally inadequate. The microphones pick up my words, hurls them out full-blown, you know, from enormous speakers. And I realized we are doing the very same thing I argued against. You understand that? We blather about the horrors of World War and the rights of man, but what does it all mean if it's not followed by deeds? You know, it's all blah, blah, blah. Well, I finish, but boy, I feel totally drained. I return to my little room at the hotel, des États-Unis, you know, listening to the little sad tinkling of the piano downstairs, and pull out the flyer with my picture on it that was given to these 20,000 people. Tear it up.
Okay, so here we see that there was this, once Garry realized that the key to preventing war and to saving humanity was to create law above the nations that divide us. And once he called on the UN to do it, and Eleanor Roosevelt said, well, no way, we're not set up to do that. She actually wrote a My Day column after Garry was discouraged after that big event, because he didn't want to be the leader that everybody wanted to take to solve the problem for them. He wanted people to do it. 5 days after that historic huge rally at the Velodrome and the passing of the Declaration of Human Rights on December 10th, unanimously, I mean, the day after that huge rally, the Soviets stepped aside. So Garry was feeling like he was feeling down. The world was up. They were galvanized by this event, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was passed unanimously. And 5 days later, in her My Day column, Eleanor Roosevelt said exactly that the UN wasn't set up to be a government, a place where people could let off steam. She said how much better it would be if Mr. Davis and his comrades would create then and there a worldwide international government. This is Eleanor Roosevelt, the wife of the president, saying this. Well, to Garry, he went on a long adventure, as you'll see in the movie, coming to grips with this and dealing with, trying eventually to go to Germany to rebuild the destruction his bombs caused. Incredible film. You'll have to see all the details. But here's the key thing. What came out of that was that out of his journey and finally going into a kind of a spiritual connection where he connected with a guru in India, and he found some inner strength within him, and he finally came to a realization of how can we take action to do this? If the nations and our government leaders can't do it, as we've said here in The Wizard of Oz, the mighty wizard can't be the one to solve the problem, then how do we solve it? And Garry came to an amazing revelation, as you'll see in this next film clip.
I regained my mission to take up Eleanor Roosevelt's seemingly preposterous suggestion that I start a government. Wow, but how? Well, I went to see a top constitutional lawyer. This is interesting. He says,
Garry, take a look at the 9th Amendment. All rights not specifically enumerated are reserved to the people. Did you know that? Here's a quote from that historic Declaration of Independence. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government.
Sounds astounding. To institute new government. The people institute new government.
But do you want to know a great thing about all this?
At the global level, as Eleanor Roosevelt happily pointed out, there was no government to alter or abolish, nothing to overthrow, no violence, which is always self-defeating anyway. So there's nothing out there except a wide open, marvelous opportunity for me to go out and declare it. So, I went up to Maine, near where I was born, and told my dad my plan. He said, people don't go around declaring governments, he said. Craziest nonsense I ever heard of. And in Maine, too. Why, they'll laugh you off the platform, that is, if anybody shows up. Well,
People did show up.
not many, less than 100. A far cry from the thousands at, in Paris, but it didn't matter. Why? Because my audience wasn't local. It was global. It was you and your grandchildren. So, on September 4th, 1953, I declare at the City Hall of Ellsworth, Maine, a government of, by, and for the people of the world. You say this is crazy, but I did it. So then I went down to set up the administrative agency of the government, which is now called the World Service Authority. And it's in Washington, 5 Thomas Circle. It's functioning right now.
Wow. So look at this. This incredible realization that Garry had that was similar to what Dorothy had in The Wizard of Oz. Here he was begging and pleading these governments that he asking the whole United Nations, come on, folks, let's create a way that we can govern this planet so it's not out of control, so it doesn't destroy itself. And Eleanor Roosevelt is answering, we can't do it. It has to come from the people, it has to come from you, turning it back to him. Now look at this amazing revelation. When they said, it is the right of the people to institute new government in our Declaration of Independence, were they saying, old guys in gray wigs, or were they really talking about you and I? Do you and I actually have the right to institute new government? And if we do, if the sovereignty is in us, then doesn't it give us the key, the same thing that Dorothy was discovered in The Wizard of Oz, that all we have to do is click our heels together and realize that we are the sovereigns, that we are the ones who create governments and give them power. And all we have to do is, instead of just struggling and banging our heads against the wall and for 70 years trying to get the United Nations to reform itself and trying to get the government leaders to create law above them, why would they give up their national sovereignty? This is what's keeping them in power. This is how they win elections. They're not going to give up their national sovereignty. We, the people, have to realize that power is in us. It was in us all along. And when we make that click in our thinking, when this film and when the ongoing series that Martin Sheen is proposing we do, where we continue, and when in our people-powered planet, when we start getting people to think about the fact that we, the people, are the sovereigns, and that we have to create the power to create something new, wow. Now, wait a minute. I hear some of you out there saying, wait a minute, are you talking about world government? Oh my God, the new world order, da, da, da. Let's hear what Garry had to say about that. Watch this next clip.
With world law, we can outlaw war. With world law, we can outlaw the ravaging of our environment and harness corporate power to serve humanity.
Now, does world government scare you? Oh, well, it does me. If it's the same old forces of power, and money, controlling our lives from behind closed doors, the top-down theory, the New World Order, you've all heard about that. But what if we run it? What if we find out how to do that? That law that I've been talking about, world law, isn't beyond you, it is you. We are world law now. If you take a piece of paper, you say, we agree to, that's a legal document. You can take that into any court in the world.
Okay, so what is law? Law is a pact between the people to resolve their problems. Whenever we have citizens at every level, we see this all through the world, what do people do? They start creating governing systems to help pull their society together, so they don't just have nonstop wars, so they're not robbed left and right. So they create a little bit of order, and they create a sense of connection with something larger than themselves. When we say that in the film, when Garry says the world is my country, which is the theme of what the movie is about, what he's saying is really, once we have that sense of patriotism to the planet, once we have the idea that we're world citizens and that the world is our country, then something happens, something magical happens. First of all, there's 3 things that happen. The first one is that we gain that connection. People put their hands on their heart when they say the Declaration of, when they say, when they salute the flag, well, if we're saluting the flag of the world, if we raise our patriotism to the global level, we can have that heart-space connection to the planet as a whole. And then second, what we do is when we become citizens is we work out how we solve the problems. But thirdly, and most importantly, we create law. We create law that, in every single country on earth, despite all the different legal systems and all the different cultures, they've all decided that killing people is illegal. There's not a single country that didn't decide that. And yet in the world, it's not illegal. Garry starts this movie. He says, I bombed people and killed people from my plane in the air. Why wasn't I arrested for it? Why weren't the people who killed my brother arrested? He was so torn up that his brother got killed in that same war. And on each side, the people who did it were doing something completely legal. That's what he realized. This is crazy. It's legal to kill people at the world because we don't have any law above the nations that divide us. I mean, can you imagine any complex organism being run with no central governing system, with some 187 different governing units all going in different directions? No wonder our planet's about to crash and burn. We've got to create something that pulls us together. Now, take a look at some of Garry's ideas, because we feel that government's got to be you have this old idea in the dominator culture. In the old culture, it grew out of a sense of there's got to be a domination. It came out of the male hierarchy. It came out of the hierarchical way of organizing things. The president on top, people underneath. Take a look at Garry's idea for how we could begin to create a more partnership form of governance, something that's not so scary, but something that really, really resonates with us. Take a look at this.
Here in Vermont, we have town hall meetings. Today, with the internet, we can all meet in the same room, the global room.
In the old days, the king was the sovereign, the one who ultimately made all the decisions. That evolved to presidents who were still on top, and the rest of us underneath. But now, people are realizing that we are all the sovereigns.
The ones who create governments and give them power.
We don't have to give our power away to representatives who become magnets for special interest money.
What if we invent a governing system in which each of us can participate? Not mob rule, but true collaboration. What if we invent world money?
Why not? We humans are an incredibly ingenious species. Why squander our genius on inventing smart bombs to do ourselves in? Why not use our great ingenuity to invent SmartGov, a way we can all interactively and intelligently and heartfully govern our communities, our regions, and our world.
Visionary, you bet, but doesn't every advance start with imagination? When we catch the vision of a people-powered planet, then, in this era of instant communication, we'll be able to evolve the tools and the platforms we need to bring the highest and best wisdom of each individual to the task of governing planet Earth.
Once we tap into the sovereignty of the whole, we can unleash the genius of humanity. End war, end oppression, solve global warming.
Wow. That's very heartwarming. Once we get that same click that Dorothy had in this picture behind us, that actually we are the sovereigns, we are the ones who can invent something completely new at the world level. I mean, Garry talked about creating world money. Well, that was way before cyber currencies. We used to think only governments could create money. It had to be French money or American money or something. And now we're discovering there can be other monies that come from the bottom up. And Garry said, let's create a world currency that way, way back in 1957. what if Garry said, we humans are an incredibly inventive species. Why squander our genius spending smart bombs to do ourselves in? Why not invent smart gov? Now, once we create that vision of the goal and we inspire people all over the world to start putting their minds to how we create it, we can create something far more dynamic and exciting. The old win-lose democracy doesn't work. I mean, this was a great invention back in 1776 when if we wanted to create people-powered government, how could you do it? We didn't even have a telephone. We didn't even have the internet or anything like that. So you had to elect representatives and send them to a distant Congress by horse and buggy to represent you. Well, right now, we don't need that. We human beings can begin to develop an interactive system. And we can have, Garry talked about developing a synergistic system where when we went, you saw from the top down with the king on top to that kind of more model of the geodesic sphere where everybody's on the top of the world in their area. We can create things like these little Zoom conferences, but with people across the border, the boundaries that divide us. We could have, whether it's Arabs and Jews or people on the different sides in the U.S. of the big controversies we have here, and you bring them together in a Zoom room, and you have a system where you use some of these technologies that help us really communicate with each other. So we're not arguing who's right and wrong, but we create topics that we're, what is the best way to create, what do we want as far as clean air for our planet? You saw in that little example, you had a clean air for the act. Well, everybody's going to say, well, we want clean air for our kids, and well, we want to be able to be productive on our industries, but we want to have clean air we can breathe, and we want to not have asthmas and so on. And you're going to find common ground. You'll find that everywhere people want their kids to have a safe future. They want to be secure. So in other words, what we need to do is invent a system that actually begins to allow the will of the people to be expressed at the global level. Now, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says, the will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of government. And almost every constitution on earth says it derives its power from the will of the people. So if we're the ones who create governments and give them their power, why are we stuck in this nation state box? Back when corporations were first invented, they were underneath the government in Thomas Jefferson's day. They got a 20-year charter to build a railroad or to do some public good. And then they would expire, or if they failed to serve the mission, they would have their charter pulled and they'd be out of business. But because they were operating globally and we the people are locked in the boxes called nation states, they said, if you tax us, govern us, stop our pollution, we'll move elsewhere. We'll move somewhere else. And so they had all the power and money, and they came out over the people. And then they began to have the best politicians money could buy. And they started controlling governments all over the world. And people have said, okay, let's force them back under the box. Let's have campaign regulations. Let's make them get back underneath the people. But you can't do it, folks. We, the people, have to wake up, click our heels together, and step up above the nations that divide us and realize that we are the sovereigns. Now, this is the sleeping superpower. We see our world in trouble all over. We see the environment heading to crash and burning. We see nuclear war more likely than ever. We see wars erupting. And humans, we have the power to solve it. All we have to do is make that click in our thinking to being world citizens, and then begin to put our incredible creative minds to power to how do we create a synergistic form of governance that's, it's as simple as an app on the phone. Garry showed that picture of SmartGov. Think about what these apps can do. I mean, why did Facebook get 2 billion people signed up? I mean, there's almost 8 billion people in the world. 2 billion of them are using one app. What a huge number of people. Well, people did that because they wanted connection with others. Facebook gave them a way to connect, share their stories, tell their stories. But you know what people want even more than that? They want the ability to make a difference. People feel hopeless. They feel helpless. Young people feel like the world is spinning out of control. If we had an app that gave them a feeling of, oh my God, we can have the power to make a difference. We can have a power to solve the problems in our communities and we can solve the clean air in our communities. And we get on this app and we find out all the best practices for solving the problem we have, and we can interconnect with all the people in the world solving that problem. And we have an app, you open it up and it's got a picture of the world, and you zoom into any part of it and you find who are the people who connect to it, and you have an app, a smart gov app that gives us the ability to start governing. And then how do you enforce that? Well, in the old dominator culture, you enforce things with guns and bombs and, oh, we're going to kill the people who don't do it. Da, da, da. No, it's from our people power. We have our world government over it right here, right in our phones. It's an app. We get on this app. We go into a store, we scan products. Oops, this is a world law violator. They're making parts for nuclear weapons. They're making things that are violating the environment. Oh, I'm not going to buy that product. Green one. This one's passed. This product is this company is conforming with world law. Okay, we'll buy that product. We go to a job site. Click here. We're going to apply for a job. Beep, beep, beep. Uh-oh. We're not going to apply to Honeywell because they're making parts for nuclear bombs. Okay, we'll go to apply to this other company. When these companies start, look, we the people, we're the whole reason for the season. We're why they're there. If they start losing their customers, if they start losing their investors, they're not going to do it. We the ones are on top, and we've put ourselves in a box that's put us under them. We've got to liberate ourselves from that box, step out of that box, and become citizens of the world. And when we do that, oh my God, the power we have, we are the sleeping superpower. We can solve these problems in the world. Humanity, we can actually save this planet from doom. We can do it, and it's inside us. Click our heels together, make that click to world citizenship. Now, I want to close by showing someone else who had the same kind of a comment. Let's take a look at what at a press conference I had with Leonardo DiCaprio, who was pointing out that here we're at the 11th hour, people. We're at the end of life on Earth. Well, he showed that in his movie. He had the parallel with Don't Look Up, that we're facing doom, and we can't fritter it away because we're making profits doing it some other way. Take a look at my question to Leo.
Warming is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, and change of weather that we've been having, the weather patterns, the flooding, hurricanes. Obviously, human beings have had a devastating impact on our planet. It seems now more so than ever we're at a real tipping point.
I'd like to ask Leo particularly. There's an old movie cliche, the planet is in peril, and it's the 11th hour, and things look really dark, and at the last minute, our hero swoops in and saves the day, saves the world. Who's the hero who's going to save us?
I think there's got to be millions of heroes. That's my answer to that. This is a gigantic worldwide movement that needs to cross cultural boundaries, religious boundaries. It needs to unify all of us. And I think how can you argue with wanting cleaner air, cleaner water? These are fundamental human rights issues at the end of the day, and that's why it is such a universal issue, and a movement that we all should be a part of. Everything has to come from the will of the people.
Everything has to come from the will of the people. So, okay, people, let's open this up to discussion, and let's talk about what is the will of the people. What are your questions, comments, ideas? And if you haven't seen this movie yet, please go to theworldismycountry.com, and you'll hear about here at the end. We'll put in the chat. We've got a special link with some of you people at some very wonderful donors, people like Steve and people like, one of the wonderful people we have on the broadcast right now is Joe Beal, and she had a beautiful, beautiful comment about the film. She said she could watch it every day. She said, who needs antidepressants when I can watch your movie? So look, this is the key, folks. This can give us joy. This can give us a sense of coherence. This can revitalize the movement. It'll help us get out of that doom and gloom that, oh my God, we just got to struggle one more time to write to the president, to write to the Congress, to try again and again. And it always fails and it doesn't work. Hey, there's something that does work, and that is for us to realize that we're world citizens and step above the nations that divide us into that space of world citizenship. So let me throw this open to you, folks. You're the heroes who are going to save us.
Arthur, how about the question of if you declare yourself a world citizen, does that mean that you have to give up your national citizenship?
Very good question. And Garry said, absolutely not. He said, I believe in concentric citizenship, that you can be a citizen of your city, of your state, of your nation, and of the world. He said, you don't have to give anything up. You just add the top level. Now, why did he give up his citizenship? Because he was a showman. He was an incredible. His dad was an orchestra leader. He grew up in a showbiz family. He knew how to get how to get press. And when you watch the movie, you'll see. I mean, before every act he did, he distributed press releases to UPI, AP, the wire services, and then he would take an action, and he would get huge press in that era. You know, you won't believe it when you'll say, well, as Steve said, why haven't we heard this story? So he knew that in order to make a splash, he would. Einstein commended Garry for being willing to make a sacrifice of himself to help wake us up to this key idea. And Einstein said that Garry grasped the key to whether humanity will continue to exist or die by its own hand. Einstein. And so Garry made that sacrifice for all of us, but he didn't think we should. He said we should just add the top level.
All right. Another question that came up was about the UN reform. What do you think about that, Arthur? Because obviously Garry was very much involved with the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, but it seems now that the UN really doesn't have a lot of. First of all, they're not a governing authority, and also it just seems like it's kind of antiquated the way it's run, right, with the Security Council and everything. So do you think it's worth pursuing UN reform?
Okay, here's the story. I think Gandhi said, there go my people. I'm their leader. I must follow them. And, here's the thing. Once we, the people, start creating this global citizen app, this app where we, the people, are interactively creating the will of the people at the global level, hey, the UN's going to come to us. There are beautiful, beautiful things going on in the UN. It's unbelievable, the wonderful statements that have come out of the UN, the rights of the child, the rights of women, the rights of indigenous people, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Whenever bodies of humans get together, they come up with great ideas with what we ought to do. But the UN doesn't have the ability to enforce that. They don't have the ability to be a government. As Eleanor Roosevelt told Garry, back then, they don't have it. And they're not going to fix themselves, because why would they? All these politicians stay in power by, we're going to get that other. Look at this. We have these wars, and in every case, the politician leading these wars is enhancing their power by, we're going to save you from that other. They're not going to fix themselves. Once we the people, start creating the demand, we're the ones who create the demand for products. We're the ones who have to create the demand through creating this world citizen app and so on. Then, the nations will come around. Eventually, the UN will be part of that. Beautiful things come out of this international discussion, but it's not going to happen from the top down. It's going to happen from the bottom up.
And I think we're joined tonight by David Gallup, who's the executive director of the World Service Authority. David, are you there? Maybe you could talk a couple of minutes just about what the World Service Authority, which Garry Davis founded, what it is, and how people can become world citizens through the World Service Authority.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen, for hosting this event and for Massachusetts Peace Action to be bringing us all together. This is amazing to discuss the important legacy of Garry Davis and how we can take that legacy and move forward. We're coming up to Garry's, what would have been his 101st birthday on July 27th, which is World Citizen Day. So we're going to be doing some things for that. And we're actually coming up to the 75th anniversary of Garry's action to bring the idea of world citizenship to humanity. And World Service Authority, I've been working here. This is my 31st year here. I worked with Garry for almost 25 years up until he died. So I felt like he was my guru, and he had gurus who he learned from. So I want to continue to share this idea of world citizenship. Our vision is world peace and justice through world citizenship and world law. That's the vision. The mission is to educate about, promote, and implement human and environmental rights, world citizenship, world law, and to create the institutions of law that humans need to live together peacefully with each other and sustainably with the earth. it's a big project. So of course, what a lot of people know us for is the World Passport. We also issue other documents, like we have a World Birth Certificate, and all these documents you can get on our website. Maybe Melanie, you can put in the chat worldcitizengov.org, which is our newest website, actually, that just came out last summer. But if I could read to you just a quick letter or email that we got from someone relatively recently, and we've been getting so many. Well, we've always get emails and phone calls and letters from people who are in a stateless situation, who are being persecuted around the world, and we have to come up with either a legal strategy to provide, for example, a legal brief for a refugee to help them to find a safe haven, to find a safe place to live, or to stay where they are if they found a safe place, or to issue them documents, or even just through the day-to-day education that we do. But this just gives you an idea of the kind of help that people need in the world. And I'm changing the names here for privacy, but this person says, "Hello, my name is Ivan. I'm in the center of Kyiv, in the very center of the war in Ukraine. I came here before the war and find myself in captivity of my own house, since going out into the street is deadly. I'm from Russia. I have Russian citizenship, and at this time I risk getting shot in the street if I show my passport. I'm against the war in Ukraine. I support the Ukrainian army because now they will not accept me in Russia either. All of my life, I considered myself a citizen of the world, and I fully share the ideology of your organization. I also want to get such a passport, but there was no reason. It seems that day has come." So this is just one example of the many letters we get every day, emails, phone calls from people around the world, not just both in Russia and Ukraine, but in Ethiopia, in Yemen, in Syria, you name it, where wars are going on. Or look what happened in Myanmar with the Rohingya refugees who had to flee, so many, almost 1 million, to Bangladesh. These are the kinds of people that we want to help, but not just people in desperate need, but we, of course, through this film that Arthur and Melanie did, and I'm so glad that they've kept for posterity, Garry's story, but to share this with people who may not need our services, or don't know that they need our services, or don't know what world citizenship really is. And I just could make one more final comment, and because this is something that just astounds me. And you started off presenting John Kennedy. And in his inaugural address, I think everybody knows the famous phrase, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." But right after that, which is never, ever cited, he actually says, "My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of humanity. Finally, whether you are citizens of America or citizens of the world, ask us of the same high standards of strength and sacrifice that we ask of you." So, I mean, that's pretty amazing that a quote unquote national president would refer to himself or others as citizens of the world. But it's not actually that unusual. Even President Obama called himself a citizen of the world twice when he was in Brandenburg and standing at the big gate there. He called himself, citizen of the world. So anyway, I'm so happy to be working with Arthur and Melody, and of course to be here to educate people about what does it really mean to be a world citizen and act on that.
So, David, how do we go about if we want to get a world passport? How do we do that? Is there a lot of paperwork, or what is involved?
It's become extremely simple, thank goodness. All you have to do is go to World Citizen Gov. That's World Citizen Gov, like government.org. So worldcitizengov.org/apply. It's a form. It literally, you could do it on your phone. You could do it on your laptop, your PC, your tablet. It literally takes about 5 minutes. All you really have to do is plan ahead just to have a selfie of a picture of yourself stored in your phone, and generally some form of ID, like a copy of your driver's license, national passport, birth certificate, or even a fingerprint stored in your phone that you can simply upload. All you have to do is answer a few questions like your first and middle and last name, your birth date, your birthplace, a few other questions, and choose which documents you want, because in addition to the passport, we offer an ID, birth certificate, etc., the shipping service, any kind of expedited service. Then at the very end, it takes you to off of our website, but to a secure page to pay by credit or debit card. We also offer people to apply by mail or even simply by email without using the online form. And then you can also find those forms on our website if you don't want to use the online payment system for whatever reason. We can also, for people who just don't have internet access, we even mail application forms. We still mail forms to people around the world. And everybody we send a form to, we always give them a copy of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in their language. I mean, as Garry would say, and he said to me so many times, David, if you don't know your rights, you can't claim them. So we want everyone to know what their rights are, both the right to identify themselves as individuals with rights as world citizens, but also the right to freedom of travel on your own planet.
And people are really
tell them how that mandate of that UDHR is behind every document.
Well, so Article 13 and Article 6 of the Declaration refer to the rights, which we would say is true for only the world passport because it is a universal document, unlike a national passport, which represents the separate nation states. The world passport is a human rights document. So Article 13 is the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of a state and the right to leave any country, including your own. That's Article 13. And Article 6 says everyone has the right to recognition everywhere before the law. So who's everyone? Well, that's humanity. Where's everywhere? Well, that's planet Earth. So this is the legal basis for this document, but not just the Declaration, the UN Charter, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and more than 100 national constitutions actually affirm the right to freedom of travel. So there's also now almost 70 years of recognition of this document. Now, of course, it's not always recognized. That's why we have a legal advocacy team. So even today, there was a fellow who was able to use it to get out of the United States. He made it through the U.S. immigration, had no problems, but when he arrived in Jordan, he did have some problems. So we quickly had our legal team draft a legal letter to the Jordanian immigration authorities to let them know the legal basis of this document. So there's hundreds of thousands of these documents that have been issued since 1954. There's actually 96% of all countries have placed visa entry or exit stamps in it. Of course, it's harder to use in North America and Western Europe. Those are the wealthiest countries, the most restrictive countries when it comes to our right to identification and our right to freedom of travel.
So it's not just for refugees, it's for anybody. So if I wanted to travel, I could keep my American passport, but also have the world passport.
Yeah, like Arthur said about Garry, when you get the world passport, when you register as a world citizen, you are not giving up any other allegiance, any other status. You're just adding that additional allegiance of your link to humanity and the earth. I mean, Garry always said to also dispel any confusion. We are not here to rid the world of the nation state system. No, we're here to rid the world of the anarchy between the nation states that is the breeding ground of war.
And Melanie, why don't you tell us briefly what happened that time when you came into LAX and what the woman said and how she established her world citizenship?
Well, I was using, what I do is I use my US passport. I give that first. I said, oh, will you stamp the world passport? And the custom officer said, is this the passport we're not supposed to stamp? And I'm like, before I could answer, she goes and stamps it. So you're basically, you are, the more people that have the passport, the better, because the more power it has. The more people gathering together saying, hey, we're not okay with this anarchy. We're not okay with wars going on. At any moment we could be like Ukraine or Russia and suddenly have everything go asunder. Why should we let that happen? Why do we have to put up with that? We don't. We can gather together, just like they did for the TPNW. They're gathering together, the countries gathering together saying we're no to nuclear war. Now we can also gather together as world citizens and make a huge change. So everyone should get, by the way, everyone, just because, well, you can travel with it, but like David said, there's countries where it's more difficult that are not allowing you to use it. But please do get the world passport. Please get this world passport and support what David's doing. You also can pay even more, so refugees, people that are in dire need, can get a passport that they desperately need to get out. So
because a lot of the passports, David, are given out free of charge, right, for people who can't afford it. So that when you get a world passport, you're supporting that effort. So Anne in the chat had a comment. These all sound like great ideas, but sometimes corporations fight back, as Chevron did in Ecuador. So maybe the real opposition is not necessarily the countries, but these corporations. Does anyone, Arthur or David or anyone comment on that?
Sure, I'll jump in on that. I mean, take any one of these reforms that happen. Go back to any of them, like seatbelts. First, the car companies fought that tooth and nail, and then when Ralph Nader and the people pushed it through, and there has a law for it, then suddenly they start advertising it. We have seatbelts, we have safety, and they all went starting through all the safety mechanisms. That happens on all of these things. An environmental law, the company will oppose it, fight it, but then when the people pass it, it goes through. Then they say we're the leaders in environment. They put out ads about how environmental and green they are, and then they suddenly join that, or at least pretend to join the green revolution. But even the pretense means that they're acknowledging that we the people are the power, that we're the sovereigns. So yes, of course there'll be kickback at different stages. That's what happens with anything you do. But once we unleash ourselves from being locked in this nation state box, once we start creating, all we're trying to do, folks, something very simple: find out what is the will of the people at the global level. Did you know there's no way to tell that? There's no global election. There's no global body where we can vote. There's no way that we can express the will of the people at the global level. Once we create the app, the program that allows us to do that, that will of the people has incredible power. There's power from our will of the people. That's what Garry talked about. He talked about the sovereignty of the whole. It's not just sovereignty that I'll take my sovereignty and I'll bunker down and I'll stand off the world. No, I'm gonna take that sovereignty, that little bit of sovereignty that I have, and I give part to my nation, but I give part to the world level, and I help and be a part of that as a world citizen. And when we do that, folks, we're going to unleash the superpower. We're going to be able to save our planet. All we have to do is start getting that vision, start clicking on, our imaginations. Einstein said that imaginations are our most powerful, well, I don't remember the exact quote, but our imagination is key to changing all this. And once we start imagining how it can work to have a way that we the people govern our planet, and once we start working on that and we start putting out movies and TV shows about that, and we start creating the app to do it, we'll have the power, and then the companies will come running back to us. So let's just do it, folks.
Paul in the chat has a question. How many times have we been told force is necessary for quote unquote national interests? So is it naive to think that a people-powered movement can really stand up to armies and the force, the threat of military force?
All right, here's the key, the answer to that. Here's the key answer to that. Did you know there is no such thing as military power? There's military force, but it's powerless. You want to see the proof? Okay, the mighty French Empire couldn't beat people in the jungle in Vietnam. The US, in years of war and pouring in all that money and dropping several times the tonnage of bombs that were dropped in all of World War II, couldn't beat the people in the jungles in Vietnam. The mighty Soviet Empire, the mighty Russian Empire couldn't beat the people, the tribesmen in Afghanistan. Then we spent 20 years pounding that country with all kinds of bombs. And what happened? We pushed into power the worst of the Taliban. We pushed into power the people who would most repress women's rights. It didn't do a damn thing, all of that. Folks, there is no such thing as military power. It doesn't exist. Now, where is the power? That military power, it all comes out of this myth, this story we've been told about, this myth of redemptive violence. I'll get into that in a minute. Let me show you where the real power is. Did you know what happened? This mighty Russian army and all the tanks roaring in, they roared into Lithuania, into Estonia. They were going to crush this movement. And you know what the people there did? They had a singing revolution. I went to Lithuania, where my grandfather was born. They were the first country to completely declare themselves an independent country. Estonia was the first to declare themselves independent within the Soviet Empire. But together, there was a line of people from Estonia, Latvia, and Estonia and Lithuania, joining arms all the way across these three nations, and they managed to beat the Russian army. All these tanks came roaring in, and in Lithuania, they mourned the 14 people who were killed in their nonviolent revolution. When I went there, the tour guide told me I was on the top of this building and I was telling people, we were trying to defend our radio station and our parliament because the Russian tanks were trying to take them. And I would tell people, oh, the tanks are coming down Revolutionary Army, Revolutionary Drive, or whatever the road was. And what would people do? Would they run from the tanks? No, they all ran to the tanks. They blocked them. They joined hands. They sang song. They shared that heart space. They shared that heart love. And what happened? The Soviet army crumbled. It couldn't beat them. It had to withdraw. They won, folks. They won. Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania became independent from that. There's a KGB museum there about the horrors and horrors that this KGB did, and yet they couldn't beat them. Now, contrast that to Ukraine, where they thought they could use military. Now, there were people in the Ukraine who used nonviolent power, and it was working. But there were also hotheads who said, oh, yeah, we're going to fight, and thought there was such a thing as military power. And look what's happening. Their poor nation is getting devastated. It's getting pounded, torn apart. We're risking nuclear war. The real power, folks, the real power comes not through military force, but through the power of the people. And if we haven't learned that from these huge, how can these huge events happen and we don't see them? Why are people unaware of what happened in Lithuania and all that? Because there's not a lot of press attention. There was one news article where in South Africa it said there was a fight about to happen between these forces who were supporting Gandhians and the others, and they said, oh, but nothing came of it, and they went on to other news. There's this story in our society. There's a myth of redemptive violence. It's that old story that there's the poor damsel is in distress. The hero comes along and tries to reason with the bully, but it can't be done. Finally uses superior violence, blows away the bad guy, rides into the sunset with the girl. And the players are interchangeable. The bad guy can be Saddam Hussein, or it can be Putin, or it can be any one of these people. And the people, damsel in distress, can be the poor people of Ukraine, or the poor people of Iraq, or whatever it is. And then we're supposed to beat them with military force and ride off into the sunset. In real life, who do you know who ever killed the bad guys and lived happily ever after? Do you know anybody? Did it ever really happen? It's all a story, folks. It's all a myth. And when something big and powerful happens in the world, like the mighty Soviet Empire crumbling to nonviolent action, we can't even see it because it's outside this story, this false story we've told ourselves. It's outside the myth. And so it doesn't even become news. It didn't bleed, it doesn't lead. Folks, we've got to make that click in our thinking and realize that all along the power was in us. Where was that power that beat the Russians? It was that heart space power. It worked, and it's worked around the world. There's incredible books about the power of nonviolent action. It's the one thing, and the reason it works is because it comes from the true source of power, which is you. You're the hero who's going to save us.
That's an amazing story, Arthur. We have a question. I think someone is asking a question. They're calling in on their phone, so they can't access the chat. So I'm just going to see if I can unmute them. And if you could just ask your question. Let's see.
We can't hear you. Go ahead. Are you on the phone? Are you going to answer?
Hello. Can you hear me?
We go.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. My question was about the what do you call it? The world passport?
Yes.
Right. Well, how many countries actually? Who issues it? And how many countries actually accept it?
I'll let David answer that. Oh, David's muted. Why you're muted?
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah. Now I'm unmuted. Yeah. So almost 190 countries have recognized it by placing visa entry and exit stamps in it, meaning that an individual would go to an embassy or consulate, they would get it like a travel or tourist visa or business visa stamped in it ahead of time, or people use it when going from one country to another at a frontier post, and then it gets stamped. The issuing authority is actually World Service Authority, which is the administrative branch of the World Citizen Government that Garry founded in 1953, and then World Service Authority in 1954. The authority comes from really us, the people. We're a people-powered organization, just like we want a people-powered planet.
All right, we have time
Okay.
for a few more questions. We have a question in the chat from Kathy, and maybe this is for David. Did the United States ratify the Declaration of Human Rights?
Yeah, so every member state of the United Nations has to agree to accept the Declaration, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But I have to say the Declaration is only customary international law at best. It's not a binding treaty, meaning that governments can give lip service or say, I will support it, but then in actuality, not really uphold it. So yes, they have. And even the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the US government has ratified. But same thing, they have the power to pick and choose certain rights that they will respect or not, and to a certain degree. And this is the problem where because we don't yet have a World Court of Human Rights where we as individuals can go to the highest level, which is also mentioned in Arthur and Melanie's film, like a Supreme Court of the Earth. We don't have that yet. That means that if we can't get our rights respected locally or regionally, then we're out of luck.
So what's the next step? That's the question, I guess, right?
Well, sure. I mean, we actually have a draft statute for a World Court of Human Rights.
Okay.
That's what we're working on.
Yes, and that all has to come from the will of the people. I think the next step is for people really to, first of all, make sure you watch the film. You've got a free ticket this week only. The link is in the chat there. But if you go to The World Is My Country, well, Steve will tell you afterwards exactly where you go to get it through his organization, or you can actually just go directly to theworldismycountry.com/peace. Now that you've already come to this for Steve's event, you can go ahead and just go to that and get your ticket. So it's theworldismycountry.com/peace in lowercase. It has to all be lowercase for a piece to work. Can't be a capital P. Anyway, and you'll get your free ticket to watch it this week only. But the second thing is that every week we have a People Powered Planet podcast where we bring in amazing speakers. We had Rian Eisler talk about how we create a partnership society and a partnership form of governance. We've had Eleanor Roosevelt's grandson, Ford Roosevelt, speak. We've had the head of ICANN, Beatrice Finn, talk about that powerful people-powered movement that created this law against nuclear weapons and the manufacturing and the production and having anything to do with any of that is all made illegal by this agreement of the world that's actually enforced in international law, even though certain states, including the ones that have nuclear weapons, have not joined it. Still, we the people can be part of enforcing that. So yes, every week we talk about how to do that. So come join our People Powered Planet podcast. If you think this is a cool idea and you'd like to play with, well, how do we actually do that? Come join us and be part of inventing that. And I don't know if Joe Beal is still on the call, but she had a wonderful point that she made about just how joyous it is to be a part of this liberating feeling of realizing that we are the powerful citizens of this planet and we can make this shift. I don't know if she's there or wants to speak or not.
Arthur, just before, can you just repeat how, if someone wants to get involved with the podcast, the People Powered podcast, how do you go about doing that?
Well, it all starts for everybody. You can go to theworldismycountry.com. Just remember, that's what Garry said. The world is my country. It's an affirmation. Just affirm that the world is my country. Go to that website, and there you'll see a link where you can click on the podcast, where you can click on how to watch the film. You don't get that free ticket there. You have to put the /peace because that's not available for everybody. That's just the people who come to this podcast. But you will see how to watch it. But what happens if you actually put that /peace in, it still takes you to the same Vimeo link. It still tries to rent the film to you for $6.95. But when you put that special code in, you'll get, when you go to that site, it recalculates it to free. The code is 100% off, folks. What can you beat that deal? And the reason we're making that 100% off is some very kind people have donated funds to make this possible. And so we're so thankful to Steve and all the people here, Joe Beal, to the Young World Federalists, and all the people who are bringing you this program, and a special opportunity to watch this film this week. And we look forward to having more of these meetings, have David on for one, and so on, and begin to find out how do we, the people, break out of that box that's making us feel so depressed and so hopeless in the world, and have that power, this empowering film and empowering thought, join us. We can do it, folks.
And if you're watching this on YouTube, let's say a couple weeks from now, you can just go to theworldismycountry.com and you can get the link there. And it is, whatever it is, $7, but it pretty much is a bargain for an hour and a half movie, and make some popcorn, and it's well worth it.
Yes, definitely.
So did you want, Joe, did Joe want to say something? Joe Beal? Joe, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Well, I feel like Arthur's done such a good job of saying my things. But I'll just go back and say again, I like to say that I've watched this movie a million times, and I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but honestly, I could watch it every day, several times a day. It is such an uplift, and I would love, love, love to see us all, everybody that's here, everybody that's interested, to all get together and really take Garry's ideas forward and put them into action right now. For 60 years, I've been involved in the peace movement, and it's never been quite what I've wanted it to be. And so I wish that we could all come together and really embody Garry and everybody else is wonderful practical ideas about how we can really do this. Hey,
Wow.
and Arthur, I'll just say Wizard of Oz is one of my favorite movies too.
Yes. So let's all do that. Click our heels together, realize the power is in us, and that we are the world citizens, and that once we click our heels together and realize that we have the power to go home to our home planet. We don't have to be stuck here in this never land of wars and oppression and all that. We can go home to a peaceful and positive future. And thank you, Joe, for your beautiful comments, and for everyone who's been a part of those beautiful comments. And yes, I know you have people from all over the world here on your program, but especially there in Massachusetts. You've got some of the top brain power of some of the top, Harvard, MIT, all these. Let's get some of those people mobilized on working with us to create the people-powered planet, the SmartGov app, or the WeGov. We is both we and it's whole Earth. Let's have a WeGov app where we come together as a people and bring to the top the highest and best wisdom of each one of us and of humanity as a whole into how we govern our world. And we're inventive. Let's get all the young people in there thinking about, how do we invent this? How do we create it? The Young World Federalists is a great place to start. Join the Young World Federalists and work with other people figuring out, how do we create this? How do we govern our world? And once we figure out how we do it, boy, it turns out it's not so scary to talk about governance. We do it in our communities, our cities, our town halls, and we can have a town hall of the world. It's not going to be dominance. It's not that old dominance culture. It's this participatory culture from our hearts connecting and rising up. So,
and like you said, Arthur, at one time, it's a Declaration of Independence, not an application for independence that we had in the United States. And so you have to declare yourself a world citizen. You don't have to apply for it. I mean, you have to apply for the passport, but it's really a state of mind as much as anything.
Well, I'll tell you why that's so key. Here we are begging and pleading the UN to reform itself, and all our government, and we're writing letters, and we're trying so hard. And look at that. When America was founded, they didn't apply to England and say, "Oh, we want to be independent. We want to have our own government. We're going to apply to have a government here in the United States." No, it wasn't the application for independence. It was the declaration. We, the people, simply declare it and do it. Garry made that outrageous statement. His father said, "Oh my God, are you? You're going to declare? People don't go around declaring governments. They do, folks. That's what the folks did. That's how Thomas Jefferson and Hamilton and all that did it. They declared a government, and that created it. That's how any of the governments around the world that are there were created, by declaration, and then by people believing in that, and then by people carrying it out. This isn't set up by God. These aren't really any lines dividing our nations. These are artificial constructs. This whole idea of nations are artificially created in our minds, and then we've carried them out and we've made them into reality. We can create a new reality, folks. We can imagine governance for the planet. Hey, take a look at the Star Trek movie. You couldn't even join the Federation unless you had a government for your planet. You couldn't be a member. You know, in Star Trek, there was a government for the Earth in San Francisco. They had it based. Well, cool place to have it. Might be fun. But anyway, you know, we've got to create something above the nations that divide us, or our planet is doomed. And it doesn't have to be doomed. We can do it, folks. And it doesn't have to be scary. It has to be a partnership. So let's do it.
So inspiring. Arthur, we only have a few minutes left, and I want to give a few minutes to Alec Neely from the Young World Federalist. But first, there's a question a couple of people have been asking, so I want to raise it, which is Julian Assange, because it seems like that a lot of the governments around the world are treating him like a world citizen because he's being charged with espionage in the United States, even though he's a citizen of Australia. And it's kind of like world citizenship in reverse, right? It's like when it suits their purposes, the states are declaring certain people as world citizens. I wonder if David or Arthur or Alec, any of you have a comment on that situation?
Well, Melanie, do you want to talk a little bit about what Garry did 4 days before he passed away, or do you want me to comment on that, or do you want to? Oh, you're muted.
You're
Melanie.
muted.
Melanie, you're muted.
The fact that he was giving out the university.
No, one of the last things, well, maybe it wasn't 4 days, but within a few weeks, one of the last acts that Garry took before he passed away was to give to issue a world passport. Well, you know the story, right, Melanie? Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Okay.
You're talking about Snowden.
Snowden. I'm talking about Snowden.
Sure.
Yeah.
So he he was able to get, I think David could talk about that, about Snowden.
Yeah.
That's about
Snowden. So yes, just to go back to Assange, World Service Authority did issue a world passport to Julian Assange, but of course he was holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy, couldn't use it. He's been pretty much either incommunicado or detained. But we also did issue a passport, like, you know, over the years, Garry had done this to people in need. When he heard that Edward Snowden was living at the Sheremetyevo airport in Moscow, he said, this is ridiculous. How can we how is this at all justice? So we actually issued a world passport to Snowden through the foreign ministry in Russia, and it was never returned. So we're fairly certain that they gave it to him. But of course, in the end, he did get asylum in Russia. But, you know, once again, I would refer back to the concern that will someone like Edward Snowden or Julian Assange ever get justice in the nation state framework? I mean, they can't really go to the International Criminal Court, even though it's a valid court, because that only deals with war crimes, crimes against humanity, crimes against the peace. It doesn't deal with a human rights violation of whether it's freedom of knowledge, freedom of speech, or something to be a whistleblower, for example. That has to occur, if not in a regional human rights system, then in a world one that doesn't exist yet, but needs to.
Maybe we can just remind people that Snowden and Assange are world citizens in a sense, and they have these certain rights, that we need to respect. But because we're running out of time, I'd like to turn over to Alec from the Young World Federalists. Could you tell us a little bit, Alec, about what the organization is and what's coming up in your I think you have an event coming up in October?
Absolutely. So hello, everybody. My name is Alec Neely. I'm a Northeastern University student in Boston and a board of directors member both of Massachusetts Peace Action as well as of the organization called the Young World Federalists, which co-sponsored this film screening. So if you all felt the same way, hopefully, as I did about the message of this film and the ambition of one world, a sort of recognition of our shared humanity and the equality of all human life, then you agree with the fundamental understanding of the Young World Federalists and the broader World Federalist movement. And as the Young World Federalists, we are the youth wing of the movement and are a group of 20-somethings college students fighting for these values. If you are in the United States, you're the older group, the more established group would be Citizens for Global Solutions. So in the same vein as all of this that we've been talking about, I want to talk to you about an event that's being planned by the Young World Federalists and has been co-sponsored actually by Massachusetts Peace Action, as well as the World Service Authority and David Gallup here. So this year, events will be held around the world for an event called the Week for World Parliament. The largest events will be in New Delhi, Nairobi, and New York City. In New York City in particular, we expect to have more than 150 young attendees, and the event will cover everything from trainings on how to be an activist and make change in their communities to talks on the need for global action on climate, all the way up to the philosophy of world federalism and one world. We have two main themes for this year's event: ending war and saving the climate, and how strengthening global systems and uniting as a world could address both of these. We have a robust lineup of speakers, including professors, UN association leaders, NGO professionals, and hopefully the official United Nations envoy for the youth. We're even expecting MAPPA's very own Brian Garvey to give a talk on how to build peace in the world. So we're very thankful for hopefully that working out. Our goal is to be able to send young people from all over to these events. We know firsthand as a young activist group that young people don't have the money to be able to attend otherwise. So today, what I would like to ask is that if you would be so generous as to help sponsor these young activists and global thinkers to come to the event so that we may be able to pay for their accommodations, help reimburse travel expenses, afford catering at the event, and be able to provide a tour of the UN headquarters, during which we will hand a list of reforms that we want the UN to consider during next year's Summit for the Future, and which will be drafted live that weekend across 4 continents to an official representative of the UN. So I'm going to put a link in the chat. This is the official link to the website. Please, if you will go scroll down, there is a donation link. You can find out more information about all the events. People of all ages are invited to attend, so please save the link that's in the chat. The link is, if you can't see the chat, ywf.world/WWP. That's ywf.world/WWP. Like I said, people of all ages are invited to attend, so please save that link and feel free to register yourselves when tickets go on sale July 1st. And please consider donating to help educate and inspire the next generation of young global thinkers to attend this year's Week for World Parliament event in New York City and events around the whole world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alec.
Yes,
and we're going to
thank you, Alec. I want to just add a little note to that, and that is that I want to fully endorse that and just mention that, you know, Gary's first call was, he said, if you won't do it to the nation states, he said, a People's World Assembly will arise from our ranks to do it. And that's the key to what you're talking about. Yes, we need to have a People's World Parliament. And that's part of, you know, when we create that app, that's just a part of it. It has to be an interactive way. Of course, it gets expressed in a parliament where we come together, and that parliament basically has to start from, as you were working on, from the bottom up. And then that's when it'll get embraced. Yes, we can ask the UN to do it, but really we have to build that grassroots movement that makes it so it happens. President Kennedy told the group of Quakers who came to him and talked about having a test ban, he said, well, I agree with you, but I can't do it. You have to go out there and build a movement and make me do it. That's the only way I can do it. And, you know, we have to create that grassroots movement that makes it happen. And that's how change happens in the world. It happens from the bottom up, not the top down. And so I salute you for the work you're doing. And yes, that's very, that and the app, they're all part of the various ways that we start creating people-powered governance for our world.
Excellent, excellent. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap it up. Right now, we're just a couple minutes away from our allotted time. But so the links will be in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube, so that don't worry about it if you can't get it off the chat. We'll put the links for the various websites there, so you can watch the film or get in touch with the World Service Authority of the Young World Federalists. And I'd like to thank Arthur and David and Melanie and Alec and Brian Garvey and everyone else who helped put this together. This is really a fantastic opportunity, I think, to get the word out about Garry Davis and what he was trying to do. And like Garry Davis says, I'm not the movement. I'm just a world citizen. I happen to be a world citizen, but I'm not the leader of that movement. We all have to step up and be the leaders. Maybe you have a final word, Melanie or Arthur.
I just want to say thank you to you, Steve, because this is happening thanks to you. We really appreciate being here. Yes, what Garry was saying, it's counting. It's all of us together. We don't want to use excuses of not doing anything, because we can do this. We can do this, and it's just the power of us coming together and doing it together. So we can do this. Let's do it.
and hope to see some people at a future People Powered podcast every Wednesday. So, we can make this happen. So, all right.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody. All right. Take care.
You. Bye.
Bye-bye.